and streaming on the web since 1996. This is Cinematic Sound.
Hello everyone, my name is Jason Drury, welcoming you to another of the continuing series of film, TV and video game composer interviews on the Cinematic Sound Radio Network. Our subject today is composer Florencia Di Concilio. Born in Montevideo, Uruguay in July 1979, Florencia Di Concilio grew up in a home full of dusty Italian opera records, hanging out at a young age in nightclubs and cabarets, where her father used to play jazz and tango, and making her stage debut in the underground scene as a punk rock bass player. Defying boundaries, she went on to become an accomplished classical pianist, earning degrees from the New England Conservatory in Boston, winning international competitions and performing internationally as a concert pianist. Through a mastery of classical musical language and of electronic composition, Florencia Di Concilio has developed a trademark style that can be best described as an orchestration of everyday life. She uses real everyday noises and, through her personal sound processing technique, turns them into musical instruments and orchestrates them into organic, complex and architecturally imposing pieces of music. Recent film credits include the 2019 documentary Push, Brûlé d'Air, that won the prize for Best Original Score at the 2019 Urbana International Film Festival, screened at last year's Directors' Fortnight in Cannes. The feature Ava, prize winner at the 2017 Cannes Critic Fortnight, and River Phoenix's last film released posthumously, Dark Blood, in 2012. Di Concilio has also written major symphonic works as a composer in residence with the Miami Symphony Orchestra, and 2 piano concertos that have been performed by both South American and North American symphony orchestras. She has created music for groundbreaking visual artists like Camille Henriot, in a commission for the Jeux de Paume National Gallery in Paris, and for contemporary dance companies like the Corpus Mica Dance Company in Barcelona. In March 2020 for the Cinematic Sound Radio Network, I talked to Florencia Di Concilio via Skype at her home in Paris. The main part of our interview was about her recent project, Influence, a feature documentary that follows the rise and fall of the world's most notorious public relations and reputation management firm, Bell Pottinger. With only 2 weeks to create the music for Influence, Florencia Di Concilio took advantage of the tight deadlines to do her favourite thing, compose the film chronologically. Florencia's conception of an original score is not only a collection of nice tunes, but one long, structured piece. Because of the limited time frame, Florencia discovered the film as she was scoring it, which provides almost like an organic first impression sound within the music. Also, since the subject matter was so disturbing, the directors and Florencia Di Concilio decided to bring a subtle sarcasm throughout the music of the film, sometimes caricaturing, but also sometimes very blunt. With no time to go to a studio and record, her mixed score is electronic yet classical. During the interview, we talked about her scoring influence and her unusual scoring techniques, how she came to work on the River Phoenix film Dark Blood, her love of organic sampling, and we also try to highlight her immense enthusiasm for her work. During the show we will also be playing music from Florencia's acclaimed score for Influence, as well as a sample of more the composer's varied musical palette, from electronics to pure orchestral delight. Florencia Di Concilio, tell us all about Influence.
Well, the documentary Influence is about a notorious spin doctor, Tim Bell, from Bell Pottinger, and this ideology, I think, that he created this seemingly new way of making politics. The way he changed, he impacted the way people do politics and applying marketing, PR, commercial techniques, to human and social problems, which is the new way we make politics. At the same time, it addresses something that has always existed, which is like propaganda and like influencers and people who make us decide and make choices for us because of all the new techniques of social media, and many things have changed since the times of, say, Aristotle. It's a very complex documentary. It's not easy necessarily to tackle because there's a lot of information and there's a lot of very disturbing information and things that are like difficult to process because it's in no ways a film about like conspiracy theories or anything, but at the same time the things you realize when you're watching it are worthy of conspirationist, I don't know if you say it that way in English, website. It's just like so absurd sometimes, the things that you realize that you're like, this, you gotta be joking, But it's not, it's for real. And it's a very serious matter. And in particular about a firm that has made money out of manipulating people and people's opinions.
Yes, interesting. What made you want to work on the project?
Well, first of all, what interested me was the producers, actually, and the producer in particular, Bob Moore. I had already worked with him. He's from I Still Films. They're like one of the most, I think, relevant documentary producers in North America, or at least in Canada. And I had worked with them before. And what was interesting about this project is that one before last project I worked with them, I did 2 projects with them. I did Chameleon and Angry Inuk. And Chameleon, the director, Ryan Mullins, who's a magnificent editor, he was the editor of Influence. So when I learned that, I was like, oh my God, I'm like so happy to, I'd be like super happy to work again with this producer and with Ryan, this time as an editor. And then they showed me the trailer, more like a featurette, 8-minute or 5-minute, I don't know. I always been very cautious about giving strong opinions or having strong opinions about subjects I don't really know, especially when they're like such important subjects. And when I just saw this, I was just like, oh my God, it totally talked to me. I felt like I could understand why I was not understanding many things, if that makes any sense.
How did you go about scoring Influence?
Well, first of all, what we did is that we spoke with Bob, the producer, Ryan, the editor, and then, of course, with the directors who were mainly, they're actually journalists. And they happen to be directing this film. Their first film as directors, at least long feature. And we very quickly, it seemed very clear that we had to underline the absurdity of things with a certain sarcasm. And the word that kept coming up was the score had to be cheeky. In many parts, there's a lot of sarcasm because even the way Tim Bell talks and speaks, it's just sarcastically, it's absurd that he speaks in such a light manner about such grave subjects. And when he's like talking about Pinochet, the Chilean dictator, it's like, yeah, when I say people with troubles, but I never seen him be evil with anyone. So, the cheekiness in the score, the absurdity of the situation, it had to be sarcastic, and we had to mock, exaggerate the commercial aspect of the propaganda that we're doing. And it was fun because I had to do some music for a mock publicity for a political campaign and all that. But at the same time, all that was intertwined with very serious matters. And sometimes you had to not only be a spectator of the absurdity, but also realize that all this was causing so much harm and pain. So how did I go about scoring it? I took all these concepts, but always very important is to see the images. And I had the advantage that I had already worked with Ryan, the editor, him as a director, but he had also edited, his previous film. So I kind of knew his pace. To me, there's a lot of parallels between what the music does and what the editing does. It's like we manipulate time, right? I was already familiar, although I wasn't familiar with the film, I was already familiar with the type of pace, of pulse, of rhythm that Ryan likes. As a matter of fact, he actually won, in Sundance, he won the prize for Best Editing for another film he edited, but it was the same producers. He's an amazing editor. I just saw the film, and I had the pleasure and the privilege of being able, because of the short deadline, of being able to score it chronologically. And I think that's, to me, that's super important, that's super convenient, because first of all, I like the rush, the adrenaline of doing it really quick, and also structure comes naturally. When you're like scoring from beginning to end, and when you're like actually discovering the film, I think, sometimes the first impressions you have are like the best. And I kind of want the storytelling of the music follows the storytelling of the film, because I was discovering it as I was composing it. I think it was actually a very good thing that I had such a short time to do it, especially because I was doing it all by myself. If I had to work with other musicians or go and write a score to record with an orchestra, that's a whole other story. But given the fact that I was the one performing, recording, mixing and everything, it was awesome to have like very little time.
There's a lot of varied musical styles you use in your score for influence. How did the inspiration for those styles come about?
Came naturally, yes. When I was a pianist, because it was a time when I was a full-time pianist, I think I would always hear music very visually. And since I compose for documentaries or feature films, since I compose for the image, I see the opposite process. I see the images in a very sonic way. Sometimes it doesn't work that easily, but in this case, luckily, the images asked for certain colors, certain orchestrations. It was obvious that this sequence had to have this sort of valse, very, when you see all this, the beginning of the film, when you see all this like warehouse thing, this thing that is like preparing, building up. I mean, that's obviously an orchestra, because it's like this whole network of horrible PRs and politicians and stuff. It's like a big orchestra, trying to tune in order to perform a big piece of shit, but whatever, it's just an orchestra tuning. That's why I say I had fun, it was just like discovering the film, and because I was doing the music myself, just being able to right away produce, the music I was hearing in my head as I was discovering the images. It's interesting because I did influence at the same time. Not only I had a very tight deadline, but I was working on two other very demanding projects that were very, very different. One was it's an animated feature film. We were actually recording in London. An amazing orchestra. So it was all like this acoustic, big orchestral score with real musicians, as I writing the scores. At the same time, I was working on this I'm still working on this Netflix series that is like purely electronic stuff. In any case, purely homemade, studio-made sounds and everything. So influence came right in the middle of that. So I used both worlds, That's why you have some very orchestral parts where I use like traditional instruments and some other parts where I manipulate sounds. I'm thinking about it now. It's very paradoxical because for the orchestral parts, I used fake instruments. I just used virtual instruments because we didn't have the time, to go and record an orchestra. We had like literally no time to do that. But for the electronic parts, it's all acoustic stuff. It's mainly, just like, it's like real sounds that then I manipulated in order to make sound, electronic. So, there's both worlds, It's a hybrid between both. There's a bit of everything. I'm a little bit old-fashioned, It's like I was always very skeptical about virtual instruments and all that. The funny thing, if you want for the sarcastic thing, I mean, it's a funny thing. the harp that I was using in the score for Influence, which was a virtual instrument, which is based on samples, I was recording for real in London the week before the harpist that records those samples for these other films. So in a way, even when I'm using a virtual instrument, a VST, I'm always working with samples of at some point there was some human being playing that instrument. And that also I try to, and that's why sometimes I'm a bit of a, sorry for the bad word, but I'm a bit of a pain in the ass for a lot of sound engineers, is because, I try to make the sound work. I try to make the sound alive from the moment it is recorded, played and recorded, So then, the mix, it's not about adding qualities, to the sound that the sound is there, So like when I try to make a very human sound, is because I try to make the textures, even if it's a virtual instrument, I try to make it textured, I hate it when a sound engineer will add reverbs or effects and stuff like that. I always want to keep it very human, very relatable. I never want to feel like the music is disconnected from the image. I never want to make it sound like you're listening to a piece of music in a concert hall. I mean, I do that aside. There are many parameters. The sound has to correspond to the bass you're seeing on the film. I always try to make the sound as human as possible, even if it comes from a computer. Sometimes there's always a bit of like borderline sound design, because when you're like sitting in a theater and like you're watching a film, you're also hearing the film, and like you don't want to hear on one hand like the sound design and on the other hand the music. I mean, it's just like you're just watching the film and there's things going in your ears. So I always try to integrate that. I never want it to sound, unless like the director asks me to do that. It's like I always try to integrate it as much as possible as just another layer of the image.
And what you have heard was music from the score to Influence, composed by my guest today, Florencia Di Concilio. My name is Jason Drury. Now, Florencia, you have worked on a number of documentaries in your career so far. How do you choose which documentaries to score?
I've been very blessed, because from the very beginning, I mean, I started scoring films as, I was a pianist when I got to Paris. I was studying at New England Conservatory in the States, and when I got to Paris, I was supposed to keep studying piano. I was like, well, nobody knows me here. I want to do film music. I was composing already, and I was super lucky. Like the next day, I met this director, and he's like, yeah, I met a friend who just met a friend, and he happened to be a director, and he was just like telling my friend, that he had a film in post-production, he didn't have music, and I was just like, I can do that. And obviously I didn't even have an apartment, so needless to say, I didn't have a piano or any place, to do a maquette or anything. So I succeeded at making a good maquette and a good test track, and I was engaged. And then he happened to be a very accomplished documentary director. He did Stranded, which was also in Sundance, but like 10 years ago, and like that film won like every possible prize that a documentary can win. I mean, it was just ridiculous. So, and I would say high profile documentary filmmakers are quite close knit. Is that a word in English? I was lucky enough, to have my work heard and I guess appreciated by other documentary heavyweights such as Hattie Honigman or Frederick Gerten, and we just started collaborating, and we still do. Because then I started scoring, and I do more and more of that, like feature films, fiction films. And many times I get asked what's the difference, between the way I score one, like feature fiction films or feature documentary films. And I never asked myself that question, actually, because, I was just like, when I got my first gigs as, scoring documentaries, I was just like, oh, great, I'm, scoring a film. It didn't cross my mind it was a documentary or feature film.
As you have said, you also worked on features. Which one so far have you enjoyed working on the most?
Look, every one of them. No, actually, not every one of them. There's some that I've been, that I've, like, the process, it's always, I don't know. I think it might be considered a problem. I might have to talk to a therapist about it. I come from a family of musicians, so I could never dissociate music, which happens to be my work and where I make my income, from life. So every film I've scored is a piece of life. So you asking me what my favorite experience is like basically asking me what my favorite part of my life was. And everything is special. Like, for instance, when I was doing this feature film that was in Cannes called Ava, a beautiful film, I'm super happy because we're starting to work soon with the same director who's doing a new feature, and I'm doing the music for that. And that's where I learned that I was pregnant with twins, and I did the whole film during my pregnancy, and I cannot dissociate that score from that. And like now I just scored this animated film called about Calamity Jane, and the team, we just finished it. So like the crew projection, the crew screening was last week, I think, and it was the very first time my kids went to a movie theater to see a movie. And when I was composing this film, like all these melodies that were on this film were the I don't know, I never thought of having kids. I never actually learned any lullabies. I had to make them up, and they actually turned out to be the melodies that appear on the film. So there are a million reasons why each score I love and I hate, it's just life.
How do you describe your musical style?
I have no idea, I do what I have a problem. That's a horrible way to start an answer. I have a problem. I think I know it. Please don't take it as something pretentious, but I think I know a little bit too much. Hence, I am able to mock a lot. And sometimes I think I master a lot of at least Western type of composition styles. And that sometimes it is a bit of a problem when you have like 10 tracks, right? Because, like in some cases, as directors are very attached to 10 tracks, and I end up I just want to get on, with the film, and the director's taste, and, if it works, it works. So sometimes I felt like I was a bit too much of a chameleon. Nevertheless, listening back, I think there's certain things that repeat that are very personal, and even like talking about samples, samples that I use, even if the style is very different, even if the film is very different, you can still hear it's me, because these samples are of objects that are like on my desk, are of my own body, are like my heartbeat, like I put my microphone, even in influence, a lot of the rhythm in the back, there's my heart, and there's this urgent kind of frequency, which is actually my alarm clock, an old alarm clock that I had when I got to Paris, and I recorded it once, and it was annoying, and that's why you hear it. So paradoxically enough, in my music, I like to be subtle. So I try to record my very personal life. You cannot get any more personal than recording your organs, but disguise it as something else. Like, for instance, I will open the window and record the rain, and just try to frequency, I try to find a frequency in all this, like, very rich, palette of frequencies that a rain sound can have, and just, like, exaggerate that particular frequency in order to get one note, and then that you will hear a note, you won't know what it is exactly, but it's actually the rain, that I was, like, listening to, so if you're watching a film where there's like, say, I don't know, somebody researching something in a newspaper, it would be completely incoherent that you will recognize my heart there, but nevertheless, it's there, but I just have to like disguise it in order to make it work with the scene, because I'm scoring for a film. Styles might change, but I think the palette that I use, it's mine and it's my own. So I don't know if it's an answer to how I would describe my style. I think it's, as I said, I dissociate music from my life. So I think I will have to tell you, I think you will probably have to talk to my therapist if I had one, and he will be able to answer that question. So, but since I don't have one, the question will remain unanswered.
And that was a suite of music from the 2017 French-produced film Ava, directed by Léa Michoche, with original score composed by my guest today, Florencia Di Concilio.
You know what? You want to know something? You want to know something about Ava? Is that, like, I actually had a very good friend. The director told me, like, she wanted twisted strings. Okay, so I said, well, I'm gonna get a wonderful musician friend who's an excellent musician, and I try to explain to him how to, like, play it wrong, and he's so good that he wasn't able to play wrong. So I was like, what the hell, So I just, like, borrowed a cello, and I, like, basically I put on the this microphone, and I just took the cello and I just started playing whatever. I mean, I am definitely no cellist. Obviously, those were samples that then, as a mosaic, And, I mean, who wouldn't love doing that? It's like being a kid, It's like playing with Legos, It's awesome, You do that, and then it just, like, works with images. It tells a story, and you have fun doing it, and you discover plenty of things, And wait to hear and see her new film. I mean, it's gonna be, like, pretty crazy. Yeah.
Now, tell us about how you got to work on River Phoenix's last film project, Dark Blood.
I'll tell you exactly how that happened, because I remember perfectly. I don't know if you know Hedy Honigman. She's a mythical documentary director, Dutch, born in Lima, Peru, but Dutch. And so I worked with her on a film. It was a feature film, although she mainly does documentary, but that happened to be a feature film. And that was presented at Rotterdam Film Festival. And at the end of the film, there was this guy, an old guy, with two canes, who approached me, and he had, like, very nice things to say about my work. George Slauser, he worked for Hollywood until that film, until the 90s, and a wonderful director, very special character. He worked a lot with Werner Herzog as his first assistant. A wonderful guy, very difficult, particular, old school director. And obviously I thought it was fascinating. So he sent me some sequences, and he's like, I'm not keen on doing tests, I think that's a bad idea, sometimes it's misleading, sometimes you do something that, you're like, this is great, but then it's not, like, it doesn't work on the film as a whole, but, like, you stick to that idea and whatever. But nevertheless, this was something very special, because this is a film that was supposed to be completed in 1992. Nobody had seen it. It is still undisclosed how they got the film, the film itself, like the bobine. I don't know how you call that in English. I forget the name, but whatever. How they actually got the material, because after Phoenix's death, the insurance company kept the physical film, and it was sealed somewhere in, I guess, California. And they were, as far as I know, they were going to destroy it eventually. And somehow, Mr. Slauser got hold of the film, and he decided to finally, 30 years later, finish it. And it was almost completed. There were some scenes that they didn't get to film because River died. And the solution he found for, with the editor for those scenes was very simple. I mean, he just, like, there's a still of the film, and he just, with his voice, tells what happens in that scene, which is interesting. But it amazingly enough, it works. I scored a couple of sequences, and he really liked it, and that's how it happened, and then I got to see the film. It was very special because, I felt very privileged to be seeing these images that I should have seen. I was a big fan of River Phoenix, but when I was like 10, I should have seen it when I was a child, and I was getting to score them. So in a way, it's like almost like a childhood dream come true. I mean, it was a very special process, And now Mr. Slauser has passed, and he was dying. I mean, he knew that this was going to be his last film. So it's a very, very particular experience. Not the happiest times, but definitely one of the most fulfilling times. It's a very strong situation. I think it's going to be a once-in-a-lifetime type of experience. Yeah.
River Phoenix, an actor who left us far too soon.
Absolutely, and in that film, you kind of see him in a different register. Well, I mean, like the title, it's a darker register, and I discover actually, because now I'm an adult and I could see it more like, objectively. I mean, he was an amazing actor, a really amazing actor.
Now, apart from working for the visual media, you've also written music for the concert hall. Do you enjoy writing for orchestra?
Very much so, because, when you work for film, you work for the film, and I think one problem that some directors have, understandably, with some composers is that they take too much space, ego-wise. Problem is that when you're a composer and you want to show everything you know how to do and and it's great, but you're still writing for the film. When I write for orchestra, it gives me the opportunity to do my own shit for the orchestra. I learn a lot from that. Okay, I already show all I know how to do, with that for the orchestra, and then I can just work for the film. It's not like I write different stuff. It's like if I were to put, at least in the films that I worked on, some of my orchestral scores on the films, they won't work, because it's just too much. I mean, of course, there are cases of excellent genius filmmakers who have used real, when I say real, purely orchestral music. Kubrick, the most famous one. But you have to see in which context. They want dialogues and a lot of things going on top. In those cases, I think probably I will bet the editors, they worked already with the music and the images serve the music. It's very different to do the other way around.
When you're using orchestra for your film scores, do you conduct?
No, I don't. I did it once because I had to fire the conductor. I'd rather be on the other side of the on one hand, I of course I would love to be with the musicians and all that, but I just have to make sure. I'd rather be on the other side, working with the sound engineer and hearing the result, so I'm able to give a more objective remark for the next take to the conductor or the musicians.
and that was the first movement of the second piano concerto composed by our guest today, Florencia Di Concilio. And Florencia, we've heard today your varied musical palettes, either orchestral or electronic. What do you prefer, writing for orchestra or writing for electronics with samples?
As I said, every film is different. To tell you the truth, I enjoy working with nice people. I'd rather work alone than working with, like, you know, people who are a pain in the ass. And it happens, you know, sometimes. But not often. I've been lucky. You know, most of the people I work with, you know, I choose them, first of all, because they're like, I sense that we can have a conversation, that I like them, that they're fun, they're nice. And I like people who are as enthusiastic as I am. That I like people who are not like, it's something that you have to, I think, that you have to consider when you're composing music, you know, and you're working with an orchestra. You know, when I was recording in London for the Calamity film, because I'm talking about that film because, you know, that's the last time I scored with a lot of musicians. You know, there was but you know, Mark Knopfler's studio. But I asked it. But what was amazing was that we had like Isabel, I never knew how to pronounce her name, Griffith's you know, orchestra. So basically, you know, we had like the first chairs of the Royal Phil, London Symphony, you know, all these wonderful people. So I asked to have way more people than it should be advised for the size of the studio. I prefer not to record, like, say, in Abbey Road or something, because I once again, you know, I was going to mix this symphonic score with the bluegrass combo, so I wanted to have a sound that was very compact and you know, like that note reverb. I mean, you can add reverberation, but you cannot, you know, take it off. So, you know, it was very, anyway, so we had like, I don't know, I think it was like 80 musicians or something like that, you know. And I took them, and the music producer, and it was James Sherman, you know, wonderful conductor, who was conducting. And you know, the music producer was like really amazed that I actually took the time. I was there early, and I had a lot of fun doing that, you know, just like shaking hands. And well, now we cannot do that anymore because of the coronavirus. But at the time, you know, like there was none of that, you know. And you know, I was just shaking hands and just saying a couple of words, you know, like chatting a bit, making a couple of jokes with each and every musician, right? Because if you're gonna spend time recording something, I've been a musician. I've been a performer myself. You know, it's like you gotta be a little bit in love with the composer, even if it's a love affair that will last 3 hours. But you don't play the same. It doesn't sound the same. You know. I mean, come on. I mean, it's a, you know, when people say music is a language, it's not a silly metaphor. It is a language, you know. I mean, you're saying something, so you may as well say something nice. So, in that case, you know, I think I thought it was very important to have at least a little bit of a human contact with the musicians, and obviously with the conductor. And by now, I completely forgot your question.
It's one thing I really do enjoy listening and hearing the passion you have for your work.
I don't know. It's just like, as I said, it's just my life. Once again, it's kind of paradoxical because, you know, I'm a bit of a hermit. Now I'm like considering moving to the very, very, very center of Paris. Like lots of people, just to make sure that I actually see people, because otherwise I can spend like days and days, you know, without seeing anybody. I mean, obviously my kids, you know, because they're here, but it's like you have to understand, I come at the very end of a process. You know, these films are, I mean, as much as the scores are a part of my life, these films, these directors and producers, they've been carrying this practice for years. So when I come to intervene in a film, it's like it's like being invited to somebody's home, and it's great, you know, because it's like you get to know not only the film, but you actually get to know people, you know, in a much deeper level. It's an artistic conversation, maybe not through words, but you know, music and images and all that. And I think I don't know, I cannot think of a more beautiful way of communicating.
How long would you prefer to score a film?
You know what? I would love to collaborate with somebody. Sometimes composers, I think, if I may, you know, sometimes they're a little bit, and I understand, you know, they're very careful of They're very scared that somebody's gonna like steal their gig because we have a very it's in a way it's very precarious. I mean, it's like you never know what's gonna happen. Like now I'm working a lot, but I have no idea. Maybe like in a couple of years I will not. I mean, hopefully I will still be working a lot. But yeah, it's lonely. But I would love to work with other people, and every time I get to work with other musicians, which doesn't happen that often, because more and more it's like not only because of budget, but because of the type of music. You're just like it's things that you do on your own and all that, which is great too. But to answer your question, I think I would rather work in a time frame in which it would allow me, if I am to work with other people, to get to know them and learn from them. As an example, this film, the feature animated film, it's about Calamity Jane, so, there was the orchestral score, but at the same time, there was, we had to have some bluegrass. And I had never worked with, although I happen to know, some of bluegrass. I am no bluegrass experts and even less, a bluegrass player. We were comfortable, budget-wise, so, I found the best people I could, and I learned a lot, and that's awesome. So, if I get to work on a film that I only have, 5 days to score it, such as, Influence, that's amazing because, as I said, I can get a natural feel of the structure. There are lots of things that just come through naturally, and it's just it's just like this kind of euphoric feeling, okay? So I love that. But at the same time, if I get to work on a film that takes a whole year, like this animated film, it's awesome too because I learn a lot from the contact with other people, and also I spend a lot more time with the director and stuff who happens to be an amazing human being, So it's every time is different, In any case, I think I would suck at doing anything else. Many times I consider doing working as a salesman or something. I think I would be lame, I think I would not be as good.
Well, Florencia, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and I do hope I've got the pronunciation of your name right. When or where we'll be able to see the documentary Influence?
So I know it's going to other festivals. I don't know what the theatrical release is. I don't know what they plan for that. I know that it's doing the festival tours. I know that many festivals have been canceled, such as South by Southwest. So to tell you the truth, I don't know what's happening. I know it's been screened, but I would not be able to tell you. I'd rather not give you a precise answer. I think that's something that we can find out with the distributors of the film and with the health organizations worldwide.
Florencia Di Concilio, thank you very much for joining us. My interview with Florencia Di Concilio took place before the COVID-19 restrictions were enforced around the world, so a soundtrack release date for Influence has yet to be announced, as well as where and when you can actually see the documentary. I do hope you enjoyed my interview with Florencia Di Concilio. I leave you with music which, in my opinion, would only come from the mind of this engaging and eccentric composer. A movement from a dance work she composed, entitled Hidden. My thanks again for Florencia Di Concilio for joining us on the show, and until we meet again, from me, Jason Drury, is take care and happy listening.
Thank you for listening to Cinematic Sound Radio. I want to thank Tim Burden for providing his voice for all the bumpers and stingers you hear throughout the program, and David Casina for providing Cinematic Sound Radio's theme music. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please email us at cinematicsound@yahoo.com. You can find us on social media at CinSound Radio on Twitter and Cinematic Sound on Facebook. And if you listen to us on Apple Podcasts, please take a moment right now to rate and review the show. It really helps us rise through the ranks and helps potential new listeners find the show. And don't forget to check out Cinematic Sound Radio at cinematicsound.net.